If I write something down, you write it down. How many people remember doing the slope formula? Same difference. You are substituting into a formula. These have to be memorized. You have this worksheet that's going to be handed to you when you take the SOL test. So there's a lot of formulas that are actually handed to you. These are not handed to you. You have to memorize these. Underneath midpoint, write down the word average. How do you find a mean or an average? Raise your hand. Tell me what you would do to find the average of your scores in this class, your test scores. What would you do, Elizabeth?
You add them all together and divide that.
Say that again. What would you do?
You add all the numbers together and then divide.
You add and you divide. All the midpoint formula is doing is finding the average of the x coordinates and the average of the y coordinates. Always have something in your head to correlate with your formula. Don't just try to memorize the formula. Use some sort of mnemonic device. Same goes for distance. What's another word for distance? Length. You're not always going to see the word distance show up in the problem, like the length. For some reason, people forget the square root symbol that goes around the entire formula. Make sure you memorize all the components. What's that called?
Subscript.
What is it?
The subscript.
Subscript. And underneath that, write down name. It's just a name. It doesn't affect the actual mathematics or calculation work going on. This is the same as saying this is x number 2, this is x number 1, this is y number 2, and y number 1. Just make sure that you are labeling your original points, whatever they might be. For midpoint, I want you thinking average. For distance, I want you thinking Pythagorean theorem. How many people have seen the Pythagorean theorem before? What am I talking about? What is the Pythagorean theorem? A squared plus b squared equals c squared. Well, what does that mean? Let's do a quick Pythagorean problem. And we'll call that c. So if you have sides 3, 4, and c, and I'm using the Pythagorean theorem, which is that, where would the 3 and the 4 go? A and B. 9 plus 16. Add them together. What's your final step if you're looking for the hypotenuse in a Pythagorean question? Okay. Take the square root. Why do we do the square root? What does that help us with? What does that do? Chloe? Right, we're looking for c, not c squared. So this, in effect, cancels out. And what are we left with? 5. There's actually 2 answers to this. What's another square root of 25? -5? But would -5 make sense in terms of a distance? No. Next year, we're going to be concerned about whether or not we have a positive or a negative or more than one solution to a problem like this. This year, because it's geometry, we're going to deal strictly with the positives. Well, why did I do that? To show you that this formula is this. We've got the squaring. That's here and that's here. We've got the addition. That's right here. We've got the square root. That's right here. The only difference is that when you are doing a distance formula problem, the distances aren't handed to you. This subtraction right here is determining that distance. This subtraction here is determining that distance. It's just being done on a graph, on a coordinate plane that you're not seeing and you're not considering. This is encapsulating all of this into a nice, neat formula so you don't have to draw a picture and you don't have to go to the graph. So when you're trying to remember the distance formula, just remember this. You know there's squaring going on, so that's in the formula. You know that there's addition going on, that's in the formula. You know that eventually, if you're looking for a hypotenuse, you do a square root. Well, do a square root. And then the only thing you really have to remember is that these 2 numbers are being determined by that and that. Turn your paper over. On the top of your paper, you have 5 midpoint problems. 5 midpoint problems, and then at the bottom you have 5 distance ones. The top ones, I'd like decimals. And what I'd like you to do is put your 2 formulas at the very top of your paper. At least write them once. I don't need you to write them down 10 times. But write down each of your formulas at the top. And then show me as much work as you can. Show me the substitution. Don't jump around from step to step without showing me the intermediate steps. At the bottom, some of these are not going to work out evenly. So I'd like you to leave them in simplified radical form. Does everybody know what I'm talking about when I say simplified radical form? If you don't, just leave it at that stage where we have the radical. If it works out, great, work it out. If it doesn't, leave it there or put it into simplified radical form. Whatever you know how to do at this point. Try those 10 problems. If you need help, come up to the therapy.